Hello art students, this is Miss Lindholm. I hope you guys are all doing well. I hope you are safe and healthy, if not a little stir crazy. This week we are doing origami. So the first thing you need is origami paper. Most commonly I think origami paper is square. It's not always square, but for the project that you guys are doing you need square paper. So we are gonna learn how to make our own. Thankfully you can use almost any paper. If you have plain computer paper at home, you could use that. You could use graph paper. You could use like ruled notebook paper. Just tear it right out of your notebook. You could also use old notebook paper that you have notes on that you don't need anymore, or old homework papers. If you have old handouts from class that you're not using, you're never gonna need it again, you could recycle that. You could also use pages from a magazine if you tear those out and fold something with that, especially because it's colorful. It can look really nice. And also, if you have rolls of wrapping paper, you could use wrapping paper. So any kind of paper that you have at home. The only kind of paper I would not suggest using would be like a cardstock or construction paper, because it's a lot thicker. You can do it, but it will be tricky. Okay, I'm gonna show you guys with the notebook paper. So the way that we're gonna do this, you don't need a ruler. You are just going to fold the edge. So that bottom edge, you're gonna fold it. And I'm gonna line it up with this pink margin line because I don't want the holes. If I go all the way to the edge of the paper, then I'll have holes on my paper and I don't want that. So I'm gonna line it up with the pink edge and then crease. So once these lines are perfectly parallel, I crease this and I would cut at the top to create my square, and I'd cut along the pink line, and I would end up with a very big square. But because I don't want to make a huge square, I'm gonna fold this into two smaller rectangles first. So I'm gonna fold it in half. I lined it up with that pink line, and now I'm gonna cut away that pink line because that's just extra paper that I don't need. Okay, this way my squares are gonna be this big, okay? So the second step is to cut this line. I've already done it. So then you have two strips. So I'll take my one strip of paper, and this is how I get a smaller square. I line that bottom edge, I line it up with the side here. And then crease. Okay. Then I'm gonna take my scissors and cut right along that edge. When I open this up, I have a square. So I could do it again right here because I have more paper. Just fold this up. Again, this edge folds up to this edge. Once it's lined up perfectly from corner to corner, I'll hold it down, and then with my other finger I can press this. This is called creasing, when you pinch and press the paper down so that it holds that fold. If you do not have scissors, you can do the fold and tear method. So I can fold this here and then crease it and then fold it the other way. So you want to crease it on both sides because it will tear more easily. And I would do that probably twice just to make sure you've got a really good fold. And a way to really make sure that it's going to tear on that line and not make a really uneven tear is if you dampen that line that you folded. So I just took a wet sponge and I ran it along the line that way. I'll hold this down and carefully tear the other side, and it comes away nice and smooth and even. Okay, so that gives me 2 squares, and this is not a square because this is longer than this side, so I could just fold this up and cut this away if I wanted to, but this square will be a different size than the other 2. Okay. This one will be slightly smaller. Okay, so now you know how to make your own origami paper. You have square paper. Now I want to talk to you about size paper. If I use a smaller size of paper, if I cut a square that's this big, I'm going to get a smaller figure. If I'm making a crane, it will be smaller. The flower is smaller. The leaves are smaller. They're a little bit smaller than the paper, but the size of the paper is going to give you an idea to how big the object will be that you're forming. So this is a piece of this kind of wreath. So if I make it with this size paper, I get this size part of the wreath, and my wreath will be this big. If I fold with this size paper and I get this size leaves, and I make a wreath from the leaves, then it's going to be about this big. So you want to think about how big your paper is, because if you don't want your wreath to be this tiny and you're using these shapes, you need to use a bigger square paper. If you're making a wreath with these and you don't want it to be much bigger than this, then you want to stick with the smaller paper. So think about the size of the paper that you're using. If I took a piece of notebook paper and I just fold it over like in the beginning, if I just fold it over like this and I cut the top off, it's going to be a huge square. And then it's going to give me really huge shapes. So this size square is going to give me this size leaves. It's going to give me this size flower. Okay? And it's going to give me that size crane. So think about how big the paper is. If you cut the paper and you're like, oh my goodness, this is too big, you can fold it in half and in half this way, and then just cut it into 4 smaller squares. And that way you also get more paper. But it's up to you how big or small you want to make it. I recommend that if you've not done origami before, don't try to go really super small, because it will be more difficult to follow the steps and fold and crease the paper. But if you've done it before, then by all means you could make it a lot smaller. But I would say that this size paper, like the size of your palm, that would be the best size. The last thing is, if you don't use paper like wrapping paper or magazine pages and you want to color it, you can just get some markers and color the paper before you start folding. It's always easier to color it before you fold, and it doesn't have to be perfect and neat, because it will just look textured and interesting once it's all folded up. So there you go. That is how you make your paper. You think about the size of the paper and whether or not you want to add color to it, but you don't have to if you don't want to. So good luck and have fun.